my grandmother was an author, and my mother is a writer as well. But they didn't write for children. I think I got into writing for children when I was expecting my son, and I put on, I got 18 kilos, and I was like a little tub sitting there, not being able to move this way or that way. And I somehow got into, I used to write earlier, but not for children. And I was in Bangalore at that time, Bangalore, as they say now. But, and there was this imprint that the Deccan Herald used to come out called Open Sesame, which was open to primarily for children. It used to be edited, and I thought it was really fun. And so I said, let me just try and send a couple of stories. In any case, I was sitting at home, twiddling my thumbs and nursing my huge stomach. And the first story got accepted. And then I wrote another one the next week. And then it just started from there. And there's been no looking back. And I think I've been lucky enough. The first couple of books I wrote, they weren't rejected. I think if they'd got rejected, I'd have had a different career path for sure. And as a journalist, in any case, I'd already, I was the correspondent for Inside Outside and for Verb, and all that has been there, done that. But for children, I found that, and then for Children's World, I started writing, and then, we got stuff together, put together as a book. And so I've been writing for children, and I find, I think the biggest high I get is more than you're having a byline in a fancy magazine, is a question of, somebody calls up and says, your book was given as a gift for an education contest in school, and things like that. And when I walk past a small little shop in Chennai or a small little shop in Ooty where I grew up, and I see my name, my books put up on the windowsill, and I think, okay, maybe Murli's not just being nice to me. I mean, the books are worth selling, So that's the kind of thing I realized. And I've been writing now I've got about, I think, more than 35 books to my own name. And of course, with Mamta, we started just 2 years ago, and we co-author all the books we put together. And I think it's more an ode to my grandmother, who was a really prolific writer. She used to write in Kannada. And even though she belonged, and we all belong to Coorg, we don't have a script as such. So we borrow we're a dialect. So we borrow the script from the Kannada language. And she used to write in Kannada and the Coorg language. So I think she was my idol growing up. So she was a painter. She was eccentric. She was a great Gandhi follower, which I am too, to this date. And nobody can say anything about Mahatma Gandhi and not get a slap or two. I mean, I'm really, actually quite fanatic about that. So that all comes from my grandmother, I think. So I have to thank her for the fact that I'm here where I am. See, the thing is, I've got kind of spoiled. I feel really privileged, and I feel a little sometimes embarrassed to say, because we had a kind of ideal childhood. My father was in the tea industry. So he grew up on a tea plantation, and my grandparents and my mother belonged to Coorg, which is like also another fantastic part of the world. So like snake, seeing a cobra fight with a mongoose, or monkeys coming into your garden and finishing up all the peaches, or walking down and you see an Indian goat, which is called the Indian bison, coming up the walkways, like very passe. And somebody will be talking about dog got picked up by the panther because apparently dog meat is like panthers love dog meat. So these kind of things are there in your back of your head when you're growing up. You sort of figure out how your life moves. If you're going from one place to the other, you don't go at a particular time because there's panther time going around that path. So I think it's just unconscious, and my mother and all of us, I think, are very, very fond of the wildlife and animals per se. And really, it's come into the books, and then when we found like a partner like WWF, so game to be able to get our work out there. So which is why we've done the EEC series. We've done, with them, which has been a total hit. And they bought into this thing that we're trying to change the outlook of children from EECs to WOW, from insects like cockroaches and mosquitoes, which are very difficult to change from EECs to WOW. But they and they totally trusted us on it, and it's come out fantastically. So it's just a question of continuing our passion. Both Mamta and myself are really, really into the wildlife, and wish we could do a lot more on the ground. But this is our way of armchair, nature, helping nature in some way or the other. I enviously have to say that parents of today have got it really easy, because there are enough parents like you who started circles, and they have other lists that are made out, and it's like, because also to some extent I think parents, with both of them working, you want to make sure that kids get the right books to read, and you don't want to be spending money just or time for that matter, doing the wrecking yourself. And after a point, I think there's some parents who've got themselves a reputation that her list sort of fits what I would like my kids to read. And if you're inclined towards wildlife and things like that, you just the parent figures out very quickly that this is the kind of list I'm going to follow, and blindly end up buying those books. which is why, I mean, they really have it easy. You just order exactly what she's told you, and if she's never gotten wrong so far, she's unlikely to go wrong in the future. So as you said, till the age of 10, like my son would start rolling his eyes, like, start suggesting a book after he turned 9. Excuse me, mom, like, get a life kind of thing, because he was the Harry Potter generation. So he started to read very early. So he's the same age as Daniel Radcliffe. So Harry Potter sitting and the three of his friends reading it at the same time, so that in the morning they can discuss it, was, part and parcel of all our lives. So obviously the books that I would also in between like to say, like, excuse me, besides Hogwarts, maybe you could read Arthy and all that. Though, of course, having said that, he loved Arthy, okay? But it would still be like saying, what could compare with Hogwarts, so they don't listen to you anymore. So as you said, as long as you have control till the age of 6 or 7, if you're lucky, is when you can sort of push these books in that have not too much. I'm a little against books that have a moral, because it's been pushed down our throat for so long, being in a boarding school, and saying these are the books that will be left there, and all the Quentin Blake and everything is like left somewhere in the bottom of the shelf, hoping like hell he won't pick it up. But we got to get the drill, and we just dive down and pick up Roald Dahl and learn all his wacky rhymes and everything by heart, and his irreverent references to school teachers and everything. But now I think to some extent, I mean, if you go with the list like somebody, I mean, I would frankly, as a mother of today, and I was working, I would blindly follow somebody. And also I would actually probably, very blindly just buy every book that Tara ever made, even though it costs the earth, and I think it's very impractical. And I'd probably buy almost every book that Roald Dahl ever wrote. And I would buy every single book of Arthy for sure. I mean, my son can even now spout the whole of Swami and Friends without a gap. I mean, and the life that he built up for himself in this, and because my grandparents lived in Mysore, and the location of where and Arthy and Arthy Lakshman lived in Mysore, and we used to walk past their house thinking, hopefully they'll come out, and of course nobody came out ever. So and the terrain that he's described is so easy to see. Some little hamlet near Mysore, and my son used to keep guessing when we were going to Bangalore, saying, "I'm sure that is where Bangalore was, and I'm sure that was where Malgudi was." So I think of being able to, and also for kids to be able to stretch their imagination, to get them a chance to be able to do this thing. Okay, Malgudi must have been set here, or this is the place you're likely to see a monkey, or this is the place you're going to. So your exposure on the real, actually offline, also helps to a large extent to reinforce what they end up picking up if you want them to go towards wildlife and be a little bit more responsible than we are probably in our generation were about nature, or take it a little more seriously. Let's see, you're asking me a very politically correct question. I'm going to give you a slightly non-politically correct answer, because I know I'm supposed to be saying something totally different. But what I would like to say is that the book we did, it's going to be a series, this book, okay? This is the first one, is of course my ultimate hero was Mahatma Gandhi. So the first book we did for the 150th anniversary year of the Mahatma was Gandhi 150 Anecdotes. And we were fortunate enough to get a publisher who lets herself get bullied when we go and talk as animatedly to her, and she gets convinced. And I presume the books are doing well, because coincidentally the Gandhi book has been optioned out in Kannada, by the way. The only book of ours, our first book in Kannada by Sapna Bookstore, which I'm so totally excited about, because all my relatives will finally take me seriously, because a book of mine has been translated into Kannada. I belong to Karnataka, as you might have guessed, though I've lived in Tamil Nadu. And so we had a list of people like who are up there, who we would like to write about. And even though there was a lockdown, and even though there was no money anywhere, our publisher, poor thing, I mean, agreed to the fact that we're going to do 5 books in this series. Okay. I mean, I don't know what was going through her mind. We didn't really care, because she just said yes. So we just, like, before she could change her mind, we got the contract done and signed off. And the only thing what happened was Mamta Naini, who's the co-author on this, she at least knew Bengali. And she's into film a lot, and she's into art and things like that. I'm also into film and art, but not having ever, I used to go and watch it when it was called, intellectually done thing in college. You go to clubs and scene clubs and watch his films. But it's not something that I would go out of the way and watch otherwise. I'd watch a Tamil film, or I'd watch a Kannada film, or a Malayalam film. I'm a great Malayalam film buff, right? And of course, Gopal Krishnan, and if you have like MT and all that writing stuff, then obviously you jolly well go and watch that. As having grown up in the South completely, and having learned Hindi just by the way, rather late in life, and still not being able to, after 16 years in Gurgaon, still I get taken for a ride with a sabji wala, because I get mixed up with 50 and 25 and all the numbers. So when we came to this project of the next person that we're going to be write about, which would have been probably Tagore or something automatically, I don't know why we decided to take a shift, because also we came to know that it's 100th birth anniversary coming up this year in May. So we said, let's do something, let him jump the queue instead of doing Tagore next. And then it became like a PhD we were doing, because as we kept going through layers, we knew him as a fantastic, filmmaker. And he knew he's very much into Western classical music and all the touching points that you tick off the boxes. But there's so much about it that, I mean, really, in fact, if I do a PhD on Ray now, I would like to do it with flying colors, because he has touched practically every single aspect of the creative life: composing, writing, drawing, children, poetry, translations. I mean, like, what has he, as a writer, it's ideally what I would like at some point in my life, maybe, because I'm never going to do films, but everything else he's done. And we have a genre that people are looking like, when's the next book coming up? When's the next book coming up? Whether it's, a book on super sleuths, or, I mean, that guy is like genius, man, absolute genius. So, and we were thinking like, wow, this is exactly the correct person we decided to write about. But what happened along the way is, because I think Penguin Random House was quite happy with the way the book was going, and it would have otherwise come out as a puffin book, which is what the Gandhi book came out as. And at that time, they probably also felt that maybe we should have had it as a Penguin Random House book, because the audience is much larger. So that's what they did with this book. So we were happy with it because the language was pitched not for kitty stuff. And anyway, Ray's life is not. And having said that, the amount of stuff he's done for children is like mind-blowing, right? And it's not that only the children read it. Every single Bengali or anybody who's grown up in Kolkata would know every single story that he's ever written for whichever age group it is, whether it's suspense or ghost or and all the films everybody has seen. So the education we ended getting into, and the nuances of that, those opera classes of Charulata to, I mean, I was like fascinated beyond control. So poor Sohini, who's our publisher, would have to listen to. I mean, she of course knows it all, right? But did you know he did this, and that swing, this and swing? Okay, Arthy, calm down. When are we getting the next part of the manuscript, kind of thing, So we really enjoyed doing this book, and I mean, I'm so glad we jumped the queue and got him in time for the 100th birth anniversary. That is going to be like day after, I think 2nd of May. And I mean, I think the most difficult, most engaging, most fulfilling book we've done so far, after 25. And coincidentally, the 25th book. I think it could have been not be Pat, more Pat than that. His 100th birth anniversary, our 25th book is the Ray book. So they kicked his head. See, this book was originally, the earlier book was primarily for children. Yeah, I used to be in advertising before, and I'm also a freelance journalist, so for a very, very long time. I used to be the Delhi correspondent for Inside Outside, and I write for Verb even today. So it's not that I don't write for adults at all. So, and we've given the mandate of sort of pitching it somewhere in between, because now friends of mine who've got kids who are 8 and 9 have also bought the book, and friends who are gifting to friends abroad for whatever the Bengali festival recently also given it to adults. So we pitched it at a level that is not going to be too verbose or too intellectual like you would expect. And we also had the responsibility that we discovered that we are probably the only two non-Bengali women who've written about Ray, which was a big pressure as far as we were concerned. So we had to sort of pitch it and get anecdotes into that, which kids and even people who are from Bengal would find interesting enough, and not so commonly known about, like the owl and things like that. And the fact that he had never even lifted a camera. I don't think most Bengalis knew the fact that he was lifting his camera for the first time for that film, which is like, I was like blown away. I said, have I got this information correct? I mean, really? And the fact that the West Bengal government is the one who's making the money on that film even today, because they are the producers. And for the chance meeting with his mother, knowing Dr. V.C. Roy, who was the chief minister, and they gave money out of the roadworks money for the film. I mean, like, all these things I think most people don't even know about. So it's very fascinating to see that a film that was made on the money from the roadworks of the Bengal government has made Satyajit Ray what he is today. So that's been very fascinating for us. A lot of the little things that we ended up finding along the way. See, the thing is, we had, as it is, we had done a whole lot of extra anecdotes, assuming that the publisher would probably take it away, or because we already had it and said maybe we can push them to make it, but we couldn't do anything except the 100, because it's the 100th birth anniversary, right? So we were stuck with the 100. But we had so many anecdotes that we had to leave behind. And at some point, I don't think the publisher knows it. She doesn't know it yet, but maybe we'll do an addendum or something like 150 or something quietly afterwards. But the one that I end up liking is because also it means where he got his influence to start with, is and this is a book, by the way, and this is number 2 in the list. And number 1, of course, I have to say, is the one on My Gandhi. And we're working on number 3 at the moment. Is going to be as fascinating a person, which will be coming out at the end of the year, which I can't even like. Soini will just kill me. I can't even talk about it, but we're having so much fun doing research because we've got lots of material. And again, it's one of these very things that we have to be really responsible about. So this book is the favorite chapter in my book, in the book. I'm only answering your questions, not the real favorite, because there were 10 favorites. But this one is called Bicycle Thieves. Because I suppose you know why exactly, because that's where the turning point, that was his turning point in his life when he saw that film. And he wanted to make films like that. So for me, which is why it's the pivotal point in his life, which is why I like that chapter, that anecdote the most. It was like a fascinating, okay, we all know, in our generation of people, you think we okay, Grey. I mean, we know about it. These are films we did, tuck. This is the one that got banned. This is the one that, got the Oscar. This is what this thing came on Khan, and Kurosawa said this about him, and But when it came down to writing from a point of view, we were not writing from a point of view for a child, frankly. We were writing from a point of view of anybody who needs to be introduced a little bit more like us, actually, as an anecdotal thing to get the feeling of across the expanse of his entire life. And for some reason, very little is written about the fact that how he came to be what he is, like we talk about his genius. And we felt that his childhood was a very unusual upbringing, actually, because to some extent, because of the circumstances were totally out of his control. And the fact that he had a father and grandfather who were like absolute geniuses. And the mother who was so behind the scenes and so low-key, who ended up being, basically he's been like molded by women. For all, I'm sure half of Bengal won't agree with me on this one. But I seriously feel it's okay. His father and grandfather were geniuses. His father died when he was just 32 plus. But his mother was the one who was there throughout. In the sense, and of course, his subsequent wife. And so I think the powers that be in his life are actually women. And I'm sure he would have been totally different person. And if you look at it through his movies also, he's so respectful and so, it's always from the gaze of the eye of a woman, I feel. If you look at a movie, it's not from Satyajit Ray's eyes. Like Manikda is looking at Charulata from Charulata's eyes, how Charulata wants to be portrayed. And I thought from a point of view of talking about gender and everything in this day and age, I have a son and it's been the most difficult thing in the universe that I've ever done is to try and bring him up a little bit, not to think he's cat's whiskers, not to think that he's like God's gift to mankind or womankind for that matter, and to do as much as anybody else would do in a household. It's not like that he sits down for lunch and because there's a cousin who's picking up the plates, like he sits like a large there. And having all that also in place, and Mamta also believes very strongly on gender issues like this, and without it making it into a like feminist kind of thing, to subtly bring up the thing over there, saying like, where would he have been if it wasn't for his mother? Where would he have been if it wasn't for his wife? And things like that, without them getting to feel like because of his mother, he did this, and because of so get it all in the whole picture. And actually, if you look at his father, couldn't have influenced him that much because he died so young. Manik was just about 2.5, 3 years old. So, and then they had to move from the family house. So where is his basic things come from his mother? And she allowed him to go and see these English movies and allowed him to do what he feel like. Left Shantiniketan when he could have easily finished the course. And which mother allows somebody to go and do film? The first film, you haven't even held a camera in your life. Excuse me? You want to give up a top selling job, top paying job when you have no money. And people write about the fact she was reluctant about letting him do what he wanted to do. Give me one parent today is going to let your son just quit a top selling job in a top ad agency and go and say, okay, pick up a film, and you've never done a film, and just say goodbye to your steady job. Parents grapple with that all the time, right? You want to get them to be creative. You want them to do IIT as well. So what you actually want is IIT plus creative. So you want an IIT student who can also play the violin and can recognize M.S. Subbulakshmi playing on the radio, which is like you're asking for the moon. So the way he got his whole education, I think, is hats off to women in his life. I think just as when my son has gone out, otherwise he would have a lot to say. In fact, I should tell you one comment he ended up saying, I'm a single mom to start with, which is actually more difficult. And also more difficult was because we lived in Delhi, which was a lot more difficult. I think it would have been a lot easier if I was in Chennai or Bangalore or Kolkata or Bombay, where I was very originally was actually. We were in Mumbai. And to sort of lay down the law because of the fact that we have less time. You're running, you have a job, and I was running Limca Book Records at that time. I was also writing books. I was also the Delhi correspondent for Inside Outsides because as a single mom, you bend over backwards trying to make sure that at least the physical comforts don't change, so that somebody doesn't turn around and say, because you're a single mom, you couldn't fly to Timbuktu, or all those things, all that guilt rubbish that comes into the picture. And I also wanted to keep his interest going because he was into Hindustani classical music. He used to play the tabla. He used to Mauritius reader. All that costs money. I mean, he's a golf player. He was into astronomy and stamps and all the things that we would have been interested when we were growing up. But it's in this day and age is so expensive. And so he would tell me, I mean, he made this comment so often. He says, you switch from being mom to friends, so I can't keep pace. Because, parents of today are trying so hard to be friends, like you said earlier. But you also have to lay down the law because you have drug problems going around. You have the single kids who feel entitled to be miserable. And, and also because, really, in the sense, so, I mean, like my father's not there, mother's like in the office, like, no, I'm not negating any of that because my son went through all of that as well. But it becomes, and if I had a daughter, I'm sure it would have been a lot easier because you're geared towards what you've gone through yourself. As a single mother, there were times I would like put my hand up and not be, it's like this Venus and Mars kind of thing. I said, I mean, how am I supposed to react? I'd SOS call some friend of mine who's a really close friend and get him to talk to my son or something, especially during the teen years. And also about reading books. Why can't I read this book? Why can't I read? And he started reading very early, my son, when he was 4. So obviously, when every other kid who's 9 is reading something, he's reading something like, like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or something, like, And at 9, you'd think you'd probably want him to read the book that you've already read and passed. He was reading Lord of the Rings for his school interview in Sriram school. They asked him what's the book you're reading, and he said Lord of the Rings. And the principal thought he was making it up. So she asked him like how many volumes are there, and he said he gave the whole rattle shattle and said that I wish they don't done the movies. It's ruined it for me and everything. And he got that seat only because of that, because his maths paper was terrible. His science paper was terrible. His English paper was fantastic. So he got this thing when there were so many kids applying for the same thing. So I think parents also have it a lot tougher now, as if you're bringing up a son, as opposed to bringing up a daughter. I think because now it's skewed towards a little bit more towards gender, not neutrality, but gender equality skewed towards the women, because everywhere there's a red flag that goes up, even if you sort of mince or even say a question wrong. So I think it becomes very difficult. What really helped my son, I think, and me, is that he moved to Chennai to do his master's in ACJ, Asian College of Journalism. And he was the youngest in his class because he woke up suddenly on one day, then he wanted to go there instead of going anywhere else or going abroad. And to my luck, most of the people that he ended up going around and getting friendly were women who had finished from JNU, who were feminists, who were radical, who had made films. And then he realized that he started looking up to them. And even the fact that he opened the door for them, like, excuse me, what the hell are you doing, kind of thing, And you're going out for dinner. They used to pay up half each. So it opened up a whole thing very different from how he was being brought up in Delhi or Gurgaon. Not brought up. I mean, I can only do that much till the front door, right? After that, it's a question of what is expected from him in society and what he needs to do. And so at times, I actually thought of the idea of moving back to Chennai or moving back to Bangalore, because I said it's not fair on me expecting him to be a feminist son when he's brought up in the most unfeminist place in the universe. But I think the Chennai thing, and then he did music in Pondicherry, at Swarnabhumi Academy of Music, which also was a big thing for me because everybody kept saying his father's a doctor and his uncle is an IIT, and then they're allowing him to do English, allowing him to do journalism. And so all these battles I fought, which he didn't really know much about. But even family from my side saying that, where's he going to make his money out of it? The amount of money you spent on his music is going to be as the same you would have spent in an MBA college. But I think the fact that the books he ended up reading, and the fact that my grandmother and mother and all of us are like pretty feminist, like if you had to put a label to it, and aware and things like that, and made him not feel like, excuse me, you're just another kid in the house, which was very good down south. But when you come here, you have to sort of shift gears and keep telling my ex-mother-in-law to tell her, please make him clear the table himself as well. Please don't take his food away and put it for wash. Because when he comes back home, I have to see, in Daddy's house, I can do all that. Why can't I do? Why can't it be left the same way here? So bringing up a boy I think in Indian society is the toughest job in the world. If you want to come out and look at, being a little proud of what you've ended up producing at the end of the day, and not want to go with the flow. I think I could have handled it better. But no, seriously, because better if I was somewhere else, frankly. I mean, I would have had family support in Bangalore. And the thing is, but I also didn't want to hear, because what happens when you belong to a very close-knit community. I belong to a community which is from Kodagu. So everybody knows everybody. And my mom's side of the family, they're very close knit. So I thought if I didn't have the clutter of how I'm supposed to bring up this boy, it would be easier. Now, in retrospect, probably I should have just taken the next flight and gone to Bangalore or Coorg or Mysore or wherever, and been able to let the family bring him up, that him being like totally under a microscope about, the fact that he's a son and he's the only son and the only grandchild, the only grandson on this side. And in North India, you know how important a grandson is. I mean, which is so exasperating, but unfortunately, I mean, I even had jewelry given to me which has been given down generations as having been the first bahu to produce a son in the family. Like, it was like, you cannot imagine how, don't even go there. I was so embarrassed, except that I had a very good equation with my ex-mother-in-law that I actually kept it and it's in the locker that I've never worn. But that's the kind of society you're sort of battling, right? And the son, it's so much easier for a boy to actually go along with that because he didn't have to lift a finger. As a teenager, all you want to do is read, listen to music and faff. So why would you have to go and set the table when your grandmother's going to set the table for you in any case? Or worse comes to a mother, because instead of making an issue in the in-laws place, you just set the table. And when you come back home, if they've already got servants, why should I clear the table? The servants are there. So all these things, I lay down the law, but it was tough because it seemed like to him, I think at that time, is that I'm laying down the law extra because there's no father in the picture. Which might have been the case without me wanting to spoil him and stuff like that, because I went through the same phase much earlier when I would refuse for my friends to give him a gun as a gift. I mean, bending over backwards on the other extreme. I said, if you want to give him dolls and all that is fine. I mean, you give him books, best, but give him gender neutral toys if you can, but definitely not give him a gun. So there's been people who've arrived in the airport from the UK and everything, and with these really fancy, expensive guns, and they've been stopped and smashed separately. And I used to get so angry because I didn't want my son to get into, this thing of bang, bang. And I mean, of course, maybe I was leaning a little bit too much on to one extreme. But I'd seen experiences of other friends of mine who had this thing of never been able to get out of that. And kids looking down at dolls, and the boys looking down at dolls, and girls not allowed to be playing with guns. And I was trying to break that stereotype because I had only one child anyway. So I managed to succeed for a long time till we went to Nepal for a holiday, and somebody gave him a kukri as a gift. And that became his most prized toy. It was like this deprived child who had nothing violent on his life. He used to go to sleep with the kukri under his pillow. And I was thinking, what have I done to this child? So, whatever you end up doing, you can't get it all right. You just hope at the end that they come out as sensitive human beings. And I must have done something right, because most of his friends are girls. And because most of my friends have 2 daughters, and they're friends since they're 3 years old or 4 years old, they talk to him about their periods, they talk to him about the books they want to read because he's a voracious reader. And they'll ask about your mom's book, should we buy the Ray book or should we not buy the Ray book? Is it the kind we have to roll our eyes about, or is it like worth reading? Things like that. So they bounce off stuff like that. When they want to buy a musical instrument, they'll ask my son. And they're really, really thick pals. And he doesn't really mind the fact that he's the only guy among all of them, because they'll make him dress up if they're going out. He won't be seen dead, like when you come like a ragamuffin. Typical teenage kid from Chennai, looking like as if he's come out of the dishwasher, literally. What's wrong with the clothes? They clean, right? And these girls are like, if you're going out, this only riffraff is the only one coming out with them. And to have to be saying that, okay, maybe you should dress up a little bit. Look at the people in Delhi when they go for a wedding, dinner. So he said, I mean, are you going to see me? Or are you going to see me? That kind of argument I've given up on, frankly, because I said if he's a decent human being and he's considerate to his girlfriends and he's considerate to his my mom and the relatives, I might have done a good job. But the teenage years were, about of course the drug problem and all that. I was like petrified because you were looking for an excuse to get into drugs in any case at that time, right? And your mother's just providing it to you on a platter. No, it was very scary years, very, very scary years. And I think what also helped is that the parent circle. You're bouncing off ideas, bouncing off problems. What happened at your, have you found something tucked up in a school bag? Have you found them like doped out or sleeping too much in the daytime? A circle makes a lot of difference. Last year, he must have spent more. He didn't believe in the Kindle. He doesn't believe in the Kindle like I do. I don't believe in the Kindle. I have a Kindle gifted to me very lovingly by my cousin, which has never been, not a single book has been downloaded except the one that's free. So he must have spent $1.5 lakh on books. So Amazon was here every second day. And as a result, he said, that's the only thing. Music and books are what kept me sane. And I still believe that music and books are what are going to keep you sane through any epidemic, any whatever, because you're going to a different world. And like now I'm reading, rereading Ray, because Ray was written earlier. So I'm reading it like a fresh reader, and I'm picking it up and saying, oh, this also happened, like, because you've written the book much earlier, you finish your piece, you're going to the next personality you're going to be writing about, and the other books, the snake book and the bees book and what have you. And so my son likes me to read a book and he'll read the book, and then we bounce ideas off each other and get each other's viewpoint. So I'm reading a book now by Salman Rushdie, which he doesn't want to read. And he wants me to read a book on Savarkar, which I don't feel like reading right now. So it's at that stage. But if you can get a child to read, I think your major part of your parenting is done.